How's everybody doing? Today we're going to continue the sadomasochistic relationship dynamic part 8. As you all know, I have done all the way up to part 7, and hopefully I can finish it today. Hopefully, and then go on with the other ones that we need to do. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This will be the 8th. So we're gonna jump right in because I don't know if I get shut off. If I get shut off, then I'm gonna have to do more of the same amount, which is crazy. Okay. Now, let me get my notes so that I can determine where I left off. We left off in the voice imagery and projections that the sadist tells himself. And then we also discussed the different terminologies of sado and masochist, or sadomasochist and the sadist. The masochist and the sadist. And then when we went into examples of a type A sadist and a type B sadist and what can trigger them, and then look for victims. They become predatory, and I told them, I described that there are a couple of types that they are attracted to. Okay, and I mentioned about the silver tongue, right? The gift of gab, which I still to discuss, which I will do, in this one. And then I've discussed also the different types of victimizations and how it can occur subtly to the most intense or extreme, and how it comes in different forms, and how we see the same masochistic dynamic in nature and also with our relationship with the Creator. Right? Okay, so we're going to continue along the same line. Okay, you have to understand that the one thing that I didn't discuss in detail, because we just didn't have time in the other segments, is the sadomasochistic relationship dynamic that exists between a man and a woman. That's another aspect of the same dynamic. Yeah. Okay. Small White Russian, my only drink, one White Russian, with Kahlua and milk. Very little milk, very little Kahlua, nothing hard, because I'm still taking antibiotics. And it's the only drink I had that's a hard drink with a lot of ice, because it's about harm reduction. Okay. Now, in men, you have to understand that this dynamic is projected upon the woman. And the dynamic of sadomasochism, in the sense that I had described it in the last segment, I'm reaching out for my notes now to discuss what I have mentioned. When it comes to a woman, this dynamic takes the mode of the master slave. Remember, I mentioned in the last one that you have the type of punishment reward mechanism that involves master slave, superior, inferior, victor, and vanquished. And I gave several examples, from very, very little, very minuscule. But I can jump into other examples using this very same formula, explaining from the smallest instances to the most extreme. Okay? Another, for example, the superior, inferior, well, we can add race to that. That's like self-explanatory right there. Okay? The master slave, well, there was a time where people of color were slaves and we had white masters. And it exists also within the white clan, because they also had their slaves. They were indentured servants, but they were also slaves. And it happened with the Jews as well as with other ethnic minorities. So we all have taken a turn in the slave-master dynamic at some point in our evolution as human beings. Okay, and then you have the dominance, submission, This one is where the man and female falls perfectly as a model, the dominant submission model. And this is another form of sadomasochistic pathology as it exists between men and women. And of course, the sociopathology is not the woman projecting it onto the man. It is the man projecting it onto the woman for a variety of reasons, many of them obvious. Let's go down the line. Women, because of the fact that they are women, can get any man they want. And this is what they are taught in our society, that the woman is the one that chooses. And the suitors got to do all they can to get her attention. And she can decide. The only power that the woman has is in choosing the man. Once she chooses the man, though, the responsibility of grooming that man and making him the great man that he will be on the day that he gets married to you, it's a tall glass of water to uphold. The woman is essentially being told by society that she is to live for her man. But we see this in the Bible. And I shall increase the pain of your labor, and you shall bear your children in pain, and your only concern will be that of your husband. It's in Genesis. You talk about sadomasochistic. So that's a sadomasochistic relationship that God has with the woman, and the woman with the serpent, and then man ultimately and Jehovah. And then Jehovah and Satan. You know, there's sadomasochism going all around. And let's not forget about nature, because nature is also a reflection of the Creator. And nature is both good and evil. It's a reflection of both. Just like our Creator, and just like the shadow and light within us as human beings, as individuals. So understand that there is nothing new under the sun, like it says in Ecclesiastes in the Bible. Everything has been done, everything has been redone, done again, and will continue to be. When they talk like that in the Bible, they're talking about spirals of cycles that repeat themselves. It may be a different decade or a different century or a different epoch, but the cycle is circular, so that means that everything that went around before will go around again. There is nothing new under the sun, as King Solomon will tell us in the King of Kings. Okay, so we can apply the same principle in this dynamic of sadomasochistic relationship, in which now the woman has to be brought to her knees because the grace that she has and the sexual pleasure that she enjoys is unlike anything that we as men will ever experience. Men has a psychological, and this is not what I say, this is what is written in the mental health fields about sadomasochism, particularly dealing with the woman and the man. And they always connect it to the sex. Again, women can have multiple orgasms. Women can have orgasm and not even touch themselves just by the power of their thought. And it helps if the man is that attractive and turns her on, you know. But the fact that she has that power, and men will never know that power, is another contention. The fact that a man can be in bed with a woman and he could be there for hours, but she will always outtop him, and she'll reinvent herself in her own orgasm, while the man, if he does 2 or 3 orgasms, the penis is already in pain. It's a muscle. The urethra begins to stretch and close. The man will not be able to produce semen if he continues to ejaculate. He'll start to be in pain, like blue balls. You get it if you have too much sex, and you get it if you don't have sex at all. Either way, it's a balance of the procreative forces. And a woman can do what she wants. She can bear children and also enjoy pleasure to untold heights. And she doesn't have to have a man to do it either. So it seems like the woman has been given a lot in the sense of her own power, while the man is limited. To give you a perfect example, the game of chess. The game of chess, you have the king and the queen. The king can move any direction, but 1 block at a time, while the queen can move across the board, up and down, ride it down diagonally, backward, this and that, and don't have to do steps like the king does. That right there, the chess game, illustrates the freedom and power of the woman. And that in itself becomes a psychological resentment and a cause for contention and enmity coming from the male. And of course, this is not direct. This is subliminal, it's subconscious. Another aspect of this sadomasochistic pathology against women is the fact that men must ejaculate into a woman. And when a man ejaculates into a woman, she's basically taking his essence. Over time, the man's energy will begin to be depleted. If you really want to know the reason why women outlive men, it is because of this essence that we give to the women. We see this in nature. What insect mates and then the female insect kills the male and eats him up so like that he can be nourishment for the baby? The grasshopper, the praying mantis does that. The female praying mantis, after she has sex with the male and takes his essence, she eats him alive and he becomes the larva for her baby's growing. This, you see it in the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the insect kingdom, which we call the phyla, and the world of protozoans and protistas, which is the world of microorganisms. So we see this dichotomy in nature. So nature is sadomasochistic. You see? So if you want to know why men don't live long, why women outlive us, the same reason why that grasshopper praying mantis ate her husband after she got his essence. So not only did she get his essence to make her babies, she used his life force as food for the incoming babies. That's fucked up, but that's nature. And nature has both principles, and it's a Scorpio principle of destruction, but also of rebirth. The father had to be eaten alive so the babies could be born. He got a good nut, pardon the French. The same thing happens with the human male. Our essence will be given to the woman, and over time, that's a life force. We age, we go older, we grow weaker. The woman gains strength behind our semen. It's protein, and it's life force. It's deep if you really think about it. So there is a deep resentment of women and a level so primordial and so deep and profound that we as men are terrified to even look at it for what it is. Another aspect is that we are born through a woman. Women are not born through us. We are born through a woman. So ultimately, we get out of one pussy to enter another. And the one that we enter is the one that's going to do us in, like that praying mantis. You understand that? It's deep. It's deep. So you see the sadomasochistic pathology relationship dynamic can also be applied to a woman against a woman coming from the man. That is another aspect. Excuse me. And we can go into several examples of this. Okay. So it can sink in. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Now, for women, okay. See, I said that about the man, right? But I can flip it and say the same thing about the woman. What do you think penis envy is about? There are women that can be very vicious and very sadistic against their men. You know, those women that hit men and abuse them, especially if they perceive them as weak, because they say, if I had a fucking dick, I'd do it 10 times better than you, motherfucker. Boom. You know, there are women like that will actually step up to a man and beat his ass, you know, and abuse him because she feels that she can. Because as men, we cannot hit a woman. You know, that is a setup also of sadomasochism. Well, now she provokes the man hits her, and now the cops come in and takes the man and takes him to jail. That's another power that the woman has. You know, and rape, I mean, we can go on and on and on. So these things are also secret harbor resentments that in a socio-pathological situation, a man falling in that category will have a hatred or enmity against a woman. And that, of course, we call misogyny. That's also another example of a sadomasochistic relationship dynamic. Okay. The woman can be a castrating woman, where she can castrate the man psychologically. And that's another form of masochism because of the penis envy. Or she can be the boss, and she will treat her men subordinates with abuse. That's another aspect. You see, it comes in all forms. Okay. Alrighty. Now, and this applies also to same-sex arrangements as well. It's not exclusive to heterosexuality. Okay. You have to understand that the latent fear, well, I mentioned it's a castration complex. I've already explained it in a more obvious way than most of my notes in the clinical books really talk about. There is a feeling though of with the masochist or sadist of this combination that he's being persecuted, that someone's out to get him, someone's out to hurt him. You know, it's a complex that they don't understand where it's coming from, and they truly genuinely have this primordial fear that someone is after them or trying to hurt them in some way, and therefore they have to rush to hurt somebody else before they get hurt. In a relationship where they feel that the best way that they can have an up on somebody is by hurting them and doing all the things first to the other person before they can do it to you. So therefore, these people don't believe in other people making them happy, but in making them miserable. So now, to even just go before it even starts, let me hurt you first, and hurt you in such a way where it cripples you. It's pathological because, this might not be the case. But for the person to already have that mindset coming in means that the person has been severely traumatized and come from such abuse that these internal mechanisms of social order and the proper socialization process that interpersonal relating requires is now severely impaired. And this leads or gives rise to the sociopath or sociopathology. Okay, this is a complex psychological, I would say, maze in the mind of these people that are going through these experiences. And what put them in that maze is a background of neglect, abandonment, or severe abuse. Okay. Let me put this here. Okay, consequently though, the sadistic person will desire to hurt another person first, like I have mentioned. Okay. As long as I write my notes and then I try to redo it again. Okay. For individuals who are defined by the sadistic pathology, there is always an underlying feeling that someone is out to get them or to be persecuted and to victimize them. And this is part of the anger dynamic of the sadist, is that he feels victimized and he doesn't understand why, and he's angry about it. So now because he feels victimized and he's angry about it, he needs to make somebody else also feel the same way he does. A totally innocent person, just because he feels that way. It's a way for him to try to shake off this type of guilt that he has for being angry, for feeling angry. Yet, this is the same person that committed the transgression in the first place. It's warped. And this is what is the problem with the sadist, right? He's coming from irrationality, trying to place it into case scenarios that he finds himself in. And what psychologists and psychiatrists in the books and essays that I read in mental health medicine is that there is a trigger that causes the sadist to do what he does and then go out on the hunt, you know. And these triggers, or engrams, as L. Ron Hubbard calls them, is what it's the source of the trauma. It's like when in the physics of the small, you have quarks and you have neutrinos, you know, and all of these make up the atom, or a particular portion of the atom, right? And it's almost like, in order to get at the pathology of why the person is like that, we have to pay attention to what triggers the abuse, because it's always cyclical. Okay. And it could come from the parental background, it could have been from the childhood background profile. And this is why in clinical social work, it's so important to have assessments done, because and to take case histories, because it is within there that you begin to find certain patterns and certain clues as to what led to the pathology of that individual, which can threaten society, because that person can marry your daughter or my son. I can't tell you how many mothers have come to see me who their sons have been murdered by their girlfriends, and they were always involved in a sadomasochistic relationship. I have experienced that myself in my own family, where several men get killed over women. It's terrible. It's terrible, but it does happen. This is nothing new. It's just now that we're living in a society where we can talk about it more. See, the sadist feels victimized, and I said that. But what I didn't say is that the masochist also feels victimized. But the problem with the masochist is that he believes that he deserves to be victimized. He believes that he deserves to be hurt and have pain afflicted to him. He's in worse shape than the sadist, believe it or not. Whereas the sadist is trying to defend a self-esteem and a self-worth that he thinks he has to defend and protect, the sadomasochist has no self-esteem or sense of self-worth, and therefore is willing to let anyone do to him what he wants, because he feels he deserves it. And these are the ones that usually die at the hands of a sadomasochistic relationship. It's very sad. It's very sad and very tragic. These are truly wounded souls. And unfortunately, a way for the universe to rescue these souls and bring them back to emotional and psychological balance is to have a sadist in their midst, to bring them to the point of destruction, for them to wake up and develop a sense of integrity and dignity and self-worth through the agency of abuse. Many of them can wake up and realize that others, unfortunately, die in the process. Very serious situation, very serious. And when it usually happens, well, another example is in gay relationships. Well, one man is abusing the other man, and then he apologizes to him and begs him that he won't do it again. Yet he ends up in the emergency room and he's severely almost dead, beaten, stabbed or something. And then this was something that used to happen a lot in the 80s, and a lot of gay couples died that way at the hands of a sadistic partner. It wasn't until better evaluation and assessment occurred in the emergency rooms of this country, in which certain situations were set up, in which if there was some kind of domestic violence, whether it was a man and a woman or same sex or regular couples, then there was always a social worker on the scene. You know, having a social worker in the emergency room, it was something that occurred in the 70s, when domestic violence became more apparent and more women ended up in the emergency room as well as men. And then that's what led the rise of social work in those days. There's a history about this, and domestic violence is very closely tied to that history. Another aspect of sadomasochistic pathology. We're done with part 8. We're going to go into part 9.